Well, let's see here. Good evening. I hope everybody is doing well. I'm going to wait for a few people to get on here and begin watching before we jump in. Look forward to connecting with everybody tonight. There's a lot of things that have been going on this week already. Lots of things going on, and I'm so grateful for what God is doing in and around our lives. If you're online and have the ability to join the live chat, I'd love for you to say hi real quick, and I'd love to be able to see who's on for a moment right before we begin, just to say hi to a few people. And so if you're online and can do the live chat, just jump in and say hey. Look forward to this. If you're having a hard time hearing me, just let me know in the chat as well, and I'll see what I can do to make some adjustments there. But tonight, we've got an exciting short little devotion for us this evening, talking about pain. And so, oftentimes we go through a lot of pain in life, and we wonder where God is in the midst of all of our pain. And that's not odd. It's actually a pretty regular response to those who are going through pain and challenges. And I just want to give us an opportunity to see things that maybe we wouldn't have seen typically, because the pain that we go through is something that we like to avoid or hide or not talk about. Sometimes we pretend God isn't in it, and sometimes we pretend God is, and we hope for a specific response. But I'll tell you, there are some pretty awesome responses we can receive from God if we'll take some time to lean in to what God is saying. And so this evening, we're going to do just that, just kind of jump in here, and I'm going to begin in just another minute or two. I just want to, again, give everybody kind of a chance to get on here and jump in. And so, again, if you're online, I'd love for you to say hi. I see we have a few people watching, and some folks, from what I understand, have had a hard time responding and getting feedback, and it may be because of cell phone problems. I know we've been having some cell phone tower issues around here recently, which means we're having some internet problems. And as a result, we'll just kind of work through this one little bit at a time. But if you're online and watching, I'd love to hear from you and just see how you're doing real quick before we begin. I'd also like to take a moment before we begin to just congratulate David and Melissa on their new son. There was a healthy pregnancy and birth. I believe it was on Monday evening or afternoon, Monday afternoon. And the baby is healthy. Melissa is healthy, and everything's going well, so to speak, other than now the lack of sleep and constant attention to a baby. That's exciting as well, but we're grateful that everybody is healthy and doing well. I'd like to begin this evening by just thanking you all again for so much support that you've given each and every single week. And I'm not just talking about financial support, but all the different ways that you support each other. Thank you guys for calling each other, checking in on each other, showing concern, especially showing concern for Maureen's family this week. There was an outpouring of love from the church, and it mattered to this family. And I was grateful to be able to participate in her life's celebration. And it was tough for the family to say goodbye, as you could imagine. But nevertheless, they knew that she was a follower of Christ, and they knew that she was going to be in heaven. And so that's a glorious thing to know in the midst of a critical crisis, a sudden moment where something in life happens and you just aren't expecting it. It's sad, and we can all acknowledge that. It's shocking, and we can all acknowledge that. But I just want to say thank you for your support. The family appreciated it. I've reached out to the family again today, and it's going to be hard for Maureen's husband. He's having a real difficult time with some things, being in the home where they lived, and so the family's trying to help him through some of this. And so continue to remember them in your prayers. Continue to remember our church in your prayers as we are looking at expanding our food pantry and getting out further into the community. This is an exciting time for us. I shared some text messages with you, and I'm not going to go into great detail right now, especially online. And for those of you who are watching are like, what's going on? You're expanding your food ministry, your food pantry? Yes, we are. But I can't go into all the details right now. It's going to be an exciting time, though, and we look forward to the ability to continue to reach out into our community in a greater capacity. So this evening, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and begin now. It's a little after 6:30, and we begin at 6:30. And those of you who are watching a little bit later, this is just a little bit of time that we're trying to give everybody to get online, but. I want to talk through a little bit of kind of God's logic here. And in the book of Psalms, there's an amazing passage that I'd like to share with you and read to you today. In Psalms 22, verses 1 and 2, it says this: my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. And I think throughout the crisis that we've been engaging in, it is easy to look at this passage right here and relate to it and wonder, God, where are you in the midst of so many challenges that we're facing? And it kind of reminds me of the story. It's a family story, a personal story. I was at my aunt and uncle's house in Illinois. My grandmother was there. My parents and I, we were there visiting. We didn't live there at the time, and so we were just there for a holiday or a little vacation or something. I don't remember exactly what the season or time frame that we were there for, but I remember that I was downstairs playing some Atari, and as I was playing some either Frogger or something like that on the Atari, I remember my uncle coming down and saying, "Hey, Brian, it's time for breakfast. Come on up." So I came upstairs. But I came up quietly. My uncle went on upstairs, and he didn't know I was behind him. He thought I was kind of goofing around, putzing around downstairs. And he gets up and he starts to walk into their kitchen. And my aunt is at the sink. And he is starting to sneak up behind her to scare her. And what he didn't realize is that I was slowly and quietly sneaking up behind him to scare him. And so everybody at the kitchen table was witnessing what was going to be a double scare. And so he goes over and scares my aunt, grabs her, "Hey!" And she jumps. And as soon as he said, "Hey!" and she jumped, I was right behind him. And I was like, "Hey!" And he jumped and screamed even louder than her, and everybody in the kitchen was laughing. I'll never forget my grandmother my grandma Downing, she was laughing so hard. She thought it was hysterical that I got him when he was trying to get her. So it was a great time. And I have that memory. But, it's so easy to see that there are moments that are scary and we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what's happening around us. And we think we know what's happening. We think we know our surroundings. We think we know every reason everything is happening. But the reality is, oftentimes, we don't know near as much as we think we do. We don't understand nearly as much as we could. And I think part of the reason is because we depend on our surroundings. We depend on familiarity to lead and guide us. But oftentimes, pain is one of the greatest leaders in our life. And I just kind of want to take some time to kind of dwell on this. A man who has recently passed away, who I greatly admire. His name is Ravi Zachariah, and great theologian, great man. And he wrote some stuff here recently, and he's written a lot of stuff, and he's a great Christian apologetics, but he's written some stuff that has just really spoke to me. And he just recently passed away, but before he passed away, he wrote some things. And this evening, I'd like to share just some of the thoughts that he shared, and they're powerful. They are really powerful. And in talking about pain, he said that the difficult reality of pain forms thorny questions on which volumes have been written throughout the ages. Why do the innocent suffer? Why do we face all of these diseases? Why the suffering of millions because of natural disasters and the tyranny of corrupt leaders? I do not pretend to have the answers, but one thing I know is that pain is a universal fact of life. And likewise, there are moral dimensions in the way we phrase our questions concerning pain, and every religion, explicitly or implicitly, in an attempt to explain our pain. And this is important for us to recognize. Oftentimes, we try to explain our pain in a manner that is comforting to us, and that's natural. We're looking for help to resolve pain, but sometimes to work through pain, we have to go into areas that are unknown. We have to explore areas that we've never explored before. So why do we even ask these questions about suffering within the context of morality? This past Sunday, I spoke about morality. This past Sunday, I talked about how we need to embrace God's word to become our morals. Any other connection will mislead and create injustice. And so we have to ask these questions concerning our pain and morality because we can get the two intertwined. So why have we blended the fact of physical pain with the demand for a moral explanation? Who decided that pain is immoral? Indeed, almost every atheist or skeptic you read names this as the main reason for his or her denial of God's existence. In the Judeo-Christian framework, pain is connected to the reality of evil and to the choices made by humanity at the beginning of time. The problem of pain and the problem of evil are that they are inextricably bound. So when we assume pain, and when we assume evil, we also assume good. When we assume good, we assume a moral law. And when we assume a moral law, we assume a moral lawgiver. Now, this sounds a lot like Sunday's message, and I promise you, I did not plan to speak what I would be reading today in this capacity tonight. And I want you to understand this. I'm trying to develop our moral thought process a little bit deeper, and I just felt like God was leading us to this point. And just as I was reading a devotion today, it literally landed on this. This very day, it landed on the very thing that I had talked about this past Sunday, and I wasn't even planning on it. It's so fascinating to see how God works like that. But it's important that we address our morals. You may ask, why does assuming a moral law necessitate a moral lawgiver? One reason is that because every time the question of evil is raised, it is either by a person or about a person. And that implicitly assumes that the question is a worthy one. Let that sink in for a moment. And so we really try to tie a moral code by a person or to a person. And when we do so within humanity, we fail every time, because morals given by men, by a person, by an individual, by a family, by a culture, will fail. Why? Because we all fail. We're humans every single time. And so it's important to understand that this moral lawgiver has to be someone greater than those who can be flawed, which is us as humans. And so it is a worthy question only if people have the intrinsic worth. And the only reason people have intrinsic worth is that they are the creations of one who is of ultimate worth, God. The reason morals are important to our life is because God has given us value and because of God's value. And God is that person who we need to look to for our moral values, because his love is perfect, his justice is perfect, his judgments are perfect. So the question self-destructs for the naturalist or the pantheist. The question of the morality of evil or pain is valid only for a theist, meaning a person who believes in God. Furthermore, only in Christian theism is love pre-existent with the Trinity, which means that love precedes human life and becomes the absolute value for us. It's in Genesis chapter 3. I'm sorry, somewhere right around there. I'm sorry, I totally lost my point of reference for it, but it's in the book of Genesis that we see early on that God created man in their image, is what it says. And God said, let us create man in our image. The understanding that there is a God who is what we have described as within the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, together as one in one accord, creating humanity, shows the value of God's love for his creation. And it's important for us to recognize this very valuable truth. This absolute of God forming man in his image because of his love for man, it serves a great purpose, and it is only found in God and in knowing and in loving God that we can work through the struggles of pain that we have in our life. Why? Because God's love for us is perfect. And even in pain, we can find strength, peace, and healing. But this is why we have to turn to God in the midst of our pain and not just respond. You know, there's a lot of ways we can respond to pain that is given to us. A lot of ways we can respond to pain given to us. First and foremost, we can respond to pain with anger. We can respond to pain with fear. We can respond to pain by taking some sort of substance to try to hide it or mask it. We can take to pain and respond to other people to try and we may not purposely lash out at people, but it becomes what naturally happens when we have something built in and kind of a rage hidden inside of us. We don't always understand that we're lashing out at people the way we are, but because of something inside of us, we can respond in hurtful ways. And this is where we often see some sort of injustice in life take place. We see injustices in life take place because of challenges that we're in, and we respond. Unfortunately, we respond with morals that don't match. And when we experience pain as Christians, we can turn around and find Christ. We can find the hope that is in Jesus Christ. We can find, through trust in him, through faith in him, a way to respond because of who God is and because of the morals in our life, through what God has taught us about how to have a relationship with him and how to have a relationship with others. Our response can be that of moral excellence in the midst of unjust pains. And that in and of itself can serve to bring healing to our lives as well as those around us. And this is why it is so important that we take the time to know God and trust God and develop our relationship with God and strengthen our relationship with God. You know, God has given us the very basis for the words good and love, right? And both in concept and in language, and he's practiced it for us, and we've experienced it. And so not far from my home here, I've witnessed people who have suffered in great capacities, great challenges, people who suffer physically, people who suffer financially, people who suffer with relationships, people who struggle with family. There's just a lot of struggle, right? And all of us can relate to this. But I want you to imagine with me someone who struggles with a disease. It's a very rare disease, but a disease nonetheless, that gives you an insensitivity to pain. And so the disease is, it's abbreviated CIPA. And this disease, look it up, it's fascinating. It creates an insensitivity to pain. So therefore you can't feel pain. And it's a very dangerous thing. So people can't feel hot or cold. They can't feel certain things. And therefore they can injure themselves really bad without even knowing that they're injured really bad. And this is a very difficult thing for a person to go through life, hurting themselves, not even know that they're hurting themselves because they can't experience it. And can I say, I believe that a lot of us have this spiritually. A lot of us hurt ourselves. We hurt ourselves over and over again, and we don't always recognize we're hurting ourselves because we're looking for answers that temporarily make us feel better. And we don't recognize that we need to take some time to heal ourselves. See, someone with this this rare disease can go through, and they have to be intentional about receiving healing. They have to be extremely intentional about making sure that they are positioning themselves with whatever is necessary for this healing, because it's not natural for them to know whether they're healed or not. They have to take time. And can I tell you, when we have dysfunctional morals, when we have morals that are broken, that don't line up with God, just familiarity can feel normal, even though it's broken and it's creating a greater sense of pain. And sometimes we don't recognize how much pain we're actually in until it takes us to a place that we've never been, and we're forced to deal with it. Oftentimes, those who have this rare disease, they can end up having to go to the hospital, and something really small becomes something really big because they didn't know, or they didn't take care of what they needed to take care of in their life. And I think this is important for us to recognize as Christians, as followers of Christ. We can't sweep things under the rug. We can't look at familiarity as a point of healing in our life. We have to allow God to bring healing in our life. And oftentimes, the way we receive healing is when God takes advantage of the opportunities that come through pain. And so sometimes pain comes to us because we physically feel it. Sometimes pain comes, though, in other forms. Sometimes people let us know that we've hurt them. If somebody has said something to you, that you said something that was hurtful to them, you didn't know it was hurtful to them and it didn't hurt you, so why should you care, right? We see that all the time in society. People respond that way. But just because it doesn't hurt you physically doesn't mean it's not hurting you. Doesn't mean it's not hurting your relationship. Doesn't mean that it's not hurting other relationships who witnessed how you may have treated somebody else. You can hurt yourself in lots of different ways and not even feel like you've hurt yourself. You can put yourself out of position. I've seen a lot of people burn bridges, not physically, but burn relationships. They got so mad at a person, I don't care what happens. I'm going to let them know what I think, and I don't care. And they burn the relationship. They burn the bridge. And then down the road, when they need the help, when they need a relationship, when they need a connection, it ends up costing them. It costs them much greater than what their response was worth. And godly morals is so important to us. And when we are told that we're causing pain, or when we experience pain and we are looking for God to give guidance to our lives, it is so important that we surrender and submit to God for healing. Whether we feel like we need it or not, we need to surrender to God for healing. It may sound like a blessing to have a disease where you can't feel pain. But the reason it's a problem is that we can live under the constant threat of injury without knowing it, and it causes a greater injury in our life. And so if we don't position ourselves to constantly seeking God, and as David would later say in Psalms, Lord, search me and know my heart, know my ways, and reveal anything that is unclean or impure inside of me. If we aren't asking that, and if we're not doing that, we are going to hurt others, and we are going to have pain ourselves. We have to position ourselves in a right relationship with God so that when we respond, our morals lead us, and they lead us to healing. I think it's so important that we take some time to simply acknowledge that we need God daily, and to not take for granted the reality that we do need God. I think it would be wise of us to take some time to think through and ponder and evaluate what ways we're hurting others and don't even know it, and ultimately then hurting ourselves. And I ask the simple question: if in our own thought process we can appreciate the value of pain in even one single life, if we can realize the value of pain, is it that difficult to grant the possibility that an infinite God can use pain to point us to a greater healing? For this person who may have this rare disease, we can recognize how important it is for them to feel pain. Can I tell you something? It's just as important for you and I to feel pain. And I want to suggest that it's just as important for you and I to recognize that it's important for God to allow us to feel pain. Because in God allowing us to feel pain, He can point us to a greater healing. We see through a glass darkly because oftentimes we want to feel comfortable. So we look through what is most comfortable, where we can be hidden, so to speak. And we can't always understand the great plan of a all-knowing God who is near us in the midst of pain. But we can relate if we will remove the film that we're hiding behind. If we can reach out and experience the pain, because again, pain is a good thing to experience because it can help save us and bring healing. And I know that we all wish to avoid pain. I know that we all wish to ignore it because the pathway of pain can be the means of a slow healing. It can be agonizing, right? However, let's just think about this for a moment. God's grace and longing to reach us is something that is so powerful because he's willing to allow his own son to suffer pain so that our relationship could be restored. And so this grace that God gives us, it's so powerful. He experienced pain watching his son die on a cross. Jesus experienced the pain of death on a cross. But all of that pain was to redeem his creation, was to redeem us. Pain was important for healing. And I want to challenge us today to understand that in the midst of pain, God can be found. And not only can God be found, but healing can be found, restoration can be found. And all that we are experiencing right now in our culture, in our society, from all sorts of different crises in multiple different places of life, we can find healing in pain. So, Jesus' death, his life, his resurrection, they point to life-defining reality that our present sorrow is only a punctuation mark because eternity with him awaits. That's the promise of healing. And yes, intellectual answers to the problem of pain are important for us to talk through. And there's many, many things that I can point to. But right now, I want to just take a moment to focus on and navigate the minefield of pain and suffering through one lens. And that is through the person of Jesus Christ. His pain on the cross, his pain was intentional to bring us life and to bring healing. And I want to suggest that today, healing can be found in this country. Healing can be found in a lot of different places, but not until we're willing to address the pain. And I just want to encourage you, as I did this past Sunday, to ask God where he is, but oftentimes you're not just going to simply find him where you want to find him, privately hidden in a room. Yes, you will find him there. Yes, you'll find him in prayer. Yes, you'll find him in scripture. But if you really want to find healing, you're going to find him where pain is. And you're going to find healing where you're willing to address pain, where you're willing to connect with people in pain. I want to challenge us as a church to continue to do this, to continue to connect with people, to learn what their pains are, to learn how each of us may have created pain. I know as a husband, I create pain for my wife. I'm just being honest, and I think all of you know this. I create pain for my wife. I also create challenges for my children. And they're not the only ones. I create challenges for my family, my parents, my sisters. I create challenges for those around me. I create challenges for those within this church. I create a lot of pain for people. And a lot of the times it's unintentional. I don't mean to. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? And I want God to restore my relationships when I create pain. But the best way that God creates pain is by acknowledging where the pain exists. And I don't know that we'll ever experience healing if we don't address where the pain exists. And so when we hear of pain from people, a wife, children, when we hear of pain from a coworker, people in our community, we need to come with open ears to listen. We need to come prepared to be someone who can bring healing, but also as one who may need healing themselves, as one who may create pain. And it is there when we surrender and submit our lives to Christ. It is there when we are trusting God and looking to God with pain in front of us, acknowledging that there is pain, acknowledging that we have created pain, and acknowledging that we feel for those who are experiencing pain, whether, again, it's a disease, whether it's the loss of a loved one, whatever it may be. It's so important that we engage in each other's pain, because that is where we will find the very presence of God to bring healing for ourselves and for those around us. So let's do that. Let's do that. As we kind of dismiss today, there are people within our church, some of whom you know about, who are experiencing some pain, the loss of a loved one. Some of us know of others who have experienced the loss of a job, and some of us can be an individual who helps someone with the pain of a loss of a job by maybe even helping pay a bill or two, right? We can help bring healing. We can help in a lot of different capacities. We can help with food. We have need within our food pantry right now. We need some more granola bars, some snack foods, maybe a few breakfast items. There's areas that we can be healing to people who are hurting, right? And you guys do such a great job of this as a church, but I want to challenge us to continue to take this deeper. Take this into areas that maybe we don't feel comfortable. We feel comfortable now in some areas, but let's continue to expand our reach. Let's continue to have conversations with those in need, those who are hurting. You know, there's the injustice of rioting taking place right now, and there's the injustice of racism. This past Sunday after our service, and I spoke about a friend of mine who had an experience with racism. Someone who attended our service, that's Sunday, as soon as my message was done, she shared of how somebody this past week had done something. And it was a very racial act. It was horrible. And I felt so bad for her. I told her I was so sorry that it happened. And I talked with her about quite a few different things. And she's a very sweet individual, very loving individual, but people are suffering, and we need to be there to bring healing for each other, because every single one of us has pain, and we need each other. And God created us in his image, and as we turn to God looking for healing, again, he'll put us in places where the pain exists so that we can deal with healing and deal with problems. So let's lean in to each other. Let's join hands. Let's work together. Let's not be afraid to love our neighbor as ourselves. And let's continue to push forward to be who God has called and created us to be, in his image, loving those around us. And the way we do this is through his morals, through the biblical standards. As we embrace his morals, when we see the perfect morals, we create justice, and healing can take place. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you guys have a great evening. I hope you all have a great week. Look forward to you all joining us this coming Sunday. I just want to tell you again how proud of you all I am. I'm just so proud of each and every single one of you guys. So many of you all are just, you don't stop. You're unrelenting in how you're willing to love people. And I'm proud of you. Thank you guys for doing that. Let's keep doing this. All right. I hope you guys have a great evening. As I have already said, at this point, I'm going to conclude our service for this evening. God bless you guys. Thank you all for joining us. and look forward to connecting with you Sunday. Let's keep in touch. Let's continue to reach out to one another, and let's continue to reach out to those outside of our church. I love you guys. God bless you guys. Have a great week.